Good afternoon, Father
Afternoon.
John. He's a Jesuit, a prominent Jesuit. So to know more about himself, I will ask him to share a bit about his background to you. So Father, once again, welcome and good
Yeah,
afternoon,
it's
Father.
great to be here. Thank you.
So can you share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm from the United States. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to a Benedictine high school in Cleveland, and then I went to John Carroll University in Cleveland. So that's our Jesuit university in Cleveland. I was a biology major. I tell people my first love was biology. I liked insects and things like that. And I was taking a course on parasitology, and so it's a study of parasites. And I fell in love with parasites. It was the first course, where they tell you to read chapter 1, and reading chapter 1, reading chapter 2, chapter 3, and it was like reading. It was like, oh, what time is it? Like, so I was just fascinated by it. So I said, that's what I want to do that. So I went to Ohio State for graduate school. When I was at John Carroll, my senior year, I did do an 8-day silent retreat. So I'm like one of those people, when I go, the buffets, those all you can eat buffets. When I go, I like to get my money's worth, right? And I was paying a lot of money to go to this Catholic university. But when you're a biology major, you're in the lab a lot. You're doing a lot of, so I didn't have a lot of time for, to do anything Catholic. So I said, I'm going to do a retreat, but not a weekend. I'm going to do the 8-day. I'm going to get my money's worth. So I did this 8-day silent retreat, and I wasn't really thinking about vocations or priesthood or anything like that. I was mostly concerning about, where I wanted to go to graduate school. So, but the retreat did fundamentally change my relationship with God and the church. So when I went to grad school, I still remained very active as a Catholic, and being involved at the Newman Center at Ohio State. And it was probably a year or two later, we were having a young adult group meeting, and it was called Stump the Pastor Night. And so we'd go around asking questions of the priest there, and he'd answer the question, but he'd also answer the underlying anxiety that kind of prompted the question. And so I remember going back to my room that day and thinking to myself, I kind of figured out his little psychological trick, and was kind of feeling proud of myself. And I said, I could do that. And I said, why don't I do that? And so that was a moment where I felt like God calling me to priesthood, and kind of imagine myself as a priest and all the things that kind of led up to this point, which great sense of peace and joy. Lasts about 5 minutes, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of grad school. This is crazy. It'll go away the next. It was probably something I ate. It'll go away the next morning, And I tried to ignore it for a few years, but as I was finishing up my PhD program, it was still there. So that call was so. Then I started going to different discernment things. So I went to Benedictines, discerned with them, and there were some Dominicans in Columbus, Ohio, and discerned with them. Marianists, discerned with them. But when I discerned with the Jesuits, I had come and see weekends. I think because I did that retreat, I say preconditioned me for the Jesuits, because when they spoke about their spirituality, I connected with that. So yeah, I kind of discerned with the Jesuits. I went through the application process. Handed in my dissertation, and 3 days later entered the novitiate. And that was 2003. And so right now I'm in January 2004, I did my first 30-day retreat, and a silent retreat. And now I'm a tertian. So this is the final stage before we take final vows, and we repeat the novitiate. So I just finished my 30-day retreat. Didn't even have a chance to get a haircut.
You look so holy by this
It's
time.
the halo. It's the halo. I'm so holy from the retreat.
So Father, you mentioned about the spiritual exercises. You know, as you have been through the spiritual exercises for the first and the second time this time. So what are the spiritual exercises?
Yeah, good question. So Saint Ignatius kind of developed what he calls the spiritual exercises, and it's basically a time where you kind of pray over the life of Christ, and the idea is that you kind of enter into Christ's life to kind of acquire some of the virtues of Jesus and to better. To emulate his life and to serve him. And so, it's done in silence, prayerful silence. So, you can kind of encounter Christ in the silence. And it's sort of developed, you kind of follow his life over time, and there's other sorts of meditations that you do, but it's something, we were, there were 9 other tertians with me doing it, as well as I believe it was about 20 other, mostly Catholic nuns that were all sisters that were doing it as well. Um, yeah, it's something Ignatius gave to the church that many people now do.
So Father, what do you do every day during spiritual exercises?
So we have like usually 4. For me, it was like 4 prayer periods. Sometimes it's 5, but 4 prayer periods. It lasts about an hour, and so those are the formal prayer periods. The retreat center we were at, they fed us 5 times a day. It was very nice, and then in between, you're still in kind of this prayerful silence, but you try to like walk around, get some exercise. They have a really great swimming pool that I took full advantage of and swim almost every day I could. And then, there's mass, there's adoration that you go to as well. And then once a day, you do meet with the spiritual director, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and just talk about how the prayer went, and he gives you some, comments, tips, and then, kind of signs, okay, now pray with these readings for the next time.
So since you have done it second times now, so what is your disposition like during this time around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first time I did it, I was a novice, and I had done the spiritual exercises, but like 8-day type retreats, right? And I think I'd done 2 before. And so now this is the 30-day, and the context is more like, oh, is this really the life for me? And am I really kind of called to being a Jesuit? That's kind of the context, although, it's a little bit more, it's a lot of it too is like getting to know Jesus and getting to know God's love for you. So, but I think the big difference is, as a novice, by definition, was new to the spiritual life, right? And now that I've kind of committed myself, you know, decades or 2 decades as a Jesuit, and then almost over 10 years as a priest. Clearly, like I'm committed to this life and have some, decent prayer life to kind of call upon. So it's a little bit more different in the sense that I am, more committed to this life, and so it's more about like reaffirming and seeing how God has worked in my life as a Jesuit and as a priest. So it's a little, I found it to be more consoling, more calm. It wasn't tumultuous. I think there was some drama, I guess, right, in the first time you do it. Whereas this, I felt, was just sort of very much more relaxed and affirming and consoling. And
So were you nervous at the time?
the first time I did
That's
it,
right.
yeah, it's a good
And
question.
then compare first time and the second time.
The first time, so again, I had done at least 2 8-day retreats before. Once as an undergrad, and then to apply to the Jesuits, you do have to do at least 1 8-day retreat. So I knew what that was like. through doing 30 days of silence, like, oh, okay, that's going to be a challenge. I do remember, they tried to like prepare you, for this life of this 30 days of more intense prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were trying to do that. But then it was in January, and then we were able to go visit our family at Christmas, right? And so, so we're visiting family and friends at Christmas. Like, my prayer life just went out the window. Right? During that time, and then you show up for the retreat, and it's like, oh yeah, I gotta pray now for, So I felt like it was just like jumping into the deep end a little bit in that sense. But yeah, I don't know if I was particularly nervous. I mean, once you kind of get into the rhythm, and I'm kind of introverted anyway, so I kind of like silence,
Mm-hmm.
and I found it kind of rejuvenating, I think.
So like for you, like you are like kind of a person that is introverted. So
Mhm.
and then you really want to be silent all the time. So for you during the retreat, it's not difficult for you to live
Keeping
in
the
the
silence was
silence.
not difficult. Leaving the silence. Yeah, I have found that I try to have conversations. The retreat was over a few days ago, and then I try to like talk to people, and it's more tiring. Like I physically feel more tiring
Mhm.
after having a conversation with someone, in a way that before the retreat, I was like, it's a little tiring as an introvert, but
Mm.
not
Oh,
nearly
that's
as
right. That's
much.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you are silent, so have you ever experienced or inner struggling uh, in your life when you mostly
So
silent?
yeah, I mean, so again, like as a novice, like there would be like you might be tempted. It's just when I did it, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the internet, but it wasn't. I didn't have a phone or anything like that. But there might be a temptation to sort of
Mhm.
you know break the silence, not by talking to someone,
Uh-huh.
but in some other way. And on this most recent
Mhm.
retreat, there might have been temptation. Oh, I need to look that up, and I'm like, no, I don't really need to look that
Mhm.
up right now. Like that's just a temptation. But so I was more easily able to kind of dismiss
Mhm.
now, as a more mature treasurer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I could dismiss it. Whereas a novice, I think maybe that
Mhm.
those little temptations that would come up, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, what's going on here? And the distractions would be more, is the first time dealing with
Mhm.
distractions. So.
So could you briefly describe how is this time different from the first time when you did retreat?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the big thing is having the experience
Mhm.
of you know what I would call like a first week Jesuit versus a second week Jesuit. I don't know how much you want to get into the spiritual exercises are kind of divided up into the first week, second week, third and fourth weeks, right? And so first week is sort of like you're new to it, right? And by the second week, you're kind of the idea is that you've committed more
Mhm.
and that you've had this life of prayer. And so I think as a novice, you're sort of most
Mhm.
novices are first week, Jesuits, right? And so a distraction comes up and it's like, oh, it's the end of the world, right? It's like, but by the time you're sort of more into the spiritual life, it's like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on.
Mhm.
You can easily dismiss
Mhm.
distractions and other, oh, that's the work of the evil spirit, and so
Mhm.
they'll just ignore that. And so I think that plays a big part of it. And then you reflect as a novice. We did maybe one experiment like teaching catechism to like
Mhm.
third graders, right? And so you reflect on that experience. Like now, as a tertian, like well, I've had like decades of
Mhm.
experience, years and years of different types of ministries to reflect on
Mhm.
and see, oh, God has really been present and
Mhm.
working in these different
Mhm.
ways. And so it's you're drawing more from your experiences as a Jesuit.
So what was your experience like this time, and compared to before, how do you see God works in your life through this through experience of retreat?
Yeah, I mean, so just to give some examples, in terms of my priesthood. So I was ordained 2014, and most guys, when they're after ordination, they have a year of pastoral work. So they'll work in a parish, and they get experience like saying mass and celebrating the sacraments and serving a parish. I had because I was going to go, when I entered, I had my PhD in biology, and so I was going to go into academia, and I already had something lined up at Creighton University. So I had a summer, and there was really just a few weeks, to work in this parish. And so, I had some experience, but not compared to other, other my Jesuit brothers, not as much, right? And so, but I still had experiences doing like funerals, right? And so, in the past 5 years, two of my aunts and three of my uncles had passed away, and then some other funerals as well. And so those, even though I didn't celebrate a lot of funerals, the ones I did had a lot of emotional significance, right, and personal significance, because I knew the people had passed away and they were family members. And when someone close to you passes away, like it's just kind of chaotic in terms of the family, getting the practical, logistical things all arranged and stuff. And you don't really have a lot of time to kind of mourn, the passing. And so what was nice in the retreat is I could kind of both mourn the passing of these aunts and uncles, and reflect, like I was able to celebrate as a priest at their funeral, right? And that was for me, like, to recognize God was really present in there, and to see to be present to others in their grief, right? And in the same way that you're at the foot of the cross and saying Jesus, and being present to Jesus and his grief, right?
So for the could you also share one specific moment of grace in your life or in your retreat that you
In
have
the
found?
retreat, yeah. There was so I like I biologist, and so I like the little critters, and I'm this is my first time in the Philippines, and so it's my first time seeing a lot of like new birds and insects and stuff. So there was one point in the retreat where they call it the hidden life of Jesus, right? So we know a few things about his birth and presentation of Jesus in the temple, and then finding Jesus in the temple. And then there's this gap of, 15, 20 years where we don't know anything about what happened to him. Like, and then, right. And so in the hidden life of Jesus, you were invited to kind of meditate a little bit. And so we don't know anything. So we can kind of just make some stuff up, right? And so I imagine what it would be like to Jesus, maybe a teenage Jesus, maybe 20 years old or something, right? And so, and then what would we do? And maybe we would like go on a nature walk. And so, and the retreat grounds it's very beautiful, and they have a kind of paths and stuff. So I went on a nature walk with Jesus, and that was kind of got to see with Jesus all these little critters that I enjoy seeing.
So Father, what do you recommend to those who are interested in exercises?
In the spiritual
Yeah.
exercises, yeah. I mean, so there's most likely a retreat center nearby. A Jesuit retreat center for sure would offer the exercises, but I'm sure other retreat centers might have something similar. So I would recommend, contacting them. If it's your first time, I probably would not recommend doing a 30-day for the first time. But there's adaptations, right? So you could do an 8-day silent retreat. Some will offer maybe like a weekend silent retreat that would kind of be based on the exercises. In the United States, and I assume elsewhere, they'll have what they call spiritual exercises in everyday life. So it's like the annotated version of the exercises. And so instead of doing it 30 days, you end up doing maybe over a period of like 6 months.
6 months.
But, once a day you commit to like 30 minutes of prayer or something, right? And then meet with the spiritual director maybe once a week, right? So you still do everything you do in your everyday life, but you just sort of like,
Mm.
I'm going to be silent for 30 minutes and pray. And
Mm.
if you can commit to that, that's, for a lot of people, they just can't
Mm.
take 30 days or even 8 days, right? So it's another way to do the exercises. So,
So Father, because we talk about spiritual exercises and we do it for 30 days. No, so maybe some people wondering why 30 days and what do they do there, no ba? So can you tell a bit about the first week, second week, third week,
oh,
fourth
sure.
week?
Right. Yeah. So it is kind of roughly divided into 4 weeks. But it's not a 7 day week, right? So the first, and even before you start the first week, there's preparatory
Mm-hmm.
stages. So a few days of just kind of preparing yourself to enter into the
Mm.
retreat and sort of, so just meditate on it. Ignatius has a few things you can kind of meditate on. It depends who your director is, but maybe, and then you kind of do the first week where again it's still kind of preparing yourself. Here you might get into like the first principle and foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
this sort of like I usually think of it as the mission statement for a Christian. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're called to do, and then the second week is usually the longest
Mm-hmm.
chronologically, I guess, and it's where you're sort of praying over the life of Jesus. So you start with the birth, and then maybe the hidden life, and then his ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third week might only be like a few days, but that would be like the passion, so
Mm-hmm.
his crucifixion, right? And then the fourth week would be focusing on the resurrection, which chronologically again might
Mm-hmm.
only be a few days. Um, and then toward maybe a day or two, just sort of reflecting, contemplation to obtain love would
Mm-hmm.
be just again kind of focusing on love that God has shown us, and then reflecting maybe also on the whole retreat as well. I should also say there are like 2 break days, so it's not like you do get a little time to sort of like, if you want to go off and
Mm-hmm.
talk to people for a day, or you can do that. So um, yeah.
So Father, why Saint Ignatius established these spiritual exercises and why it is really important for the Jesuit and for the people? I think why is it really because Saint Ignatius, the purpose of spiritual exercises is not only for the Jesuits but for everyone. But why is for Saint Ignatius really important?
Yeah, I mean, it is it's described as a gift to the church that he gave us, right?
Mm,
And so, and I think as he was engaged in spiritual conversations with others, he sort of, and with his own life, right? He sort of started discerning the spirits, and this is consolation, and the good
mhm,
spirit, and this is, desolation, the evil spirit, and when he kind of noticed the patterns in his own life and the patterns, in other people's lives, he sort of formulated these exercises so that he could lead others to God. And
mm,
so, um, and for person sort of like doing it with his close friends and sort of, okay, let's do the spiritual
mm,
exercises together. And then when they went through it, then they can now give it the
mm,
exercises to other people. So it just sort of spread.
mm. So Father, since you did the first retreat and second day retreat, second day a day's retreat for the spiritual exercises. So who is Jesus for you, Father?
Yeah. I think for me, it's like, it's basically the center of my life right now.
Mm,
But also, a friend, someone I can trust, and someone I'm called to trust in even more. I think that was something that came up in my retreat, is just surrendering more and more myself to Jesus. And so, yeah, this faithful friend that I'm called to trust and love, and who also, has shown me, great love and faithfulness over my entire life.
mhm. So what message do you want to give to the young Jesuit and to entire people to consider the spiritual exercises is really important in their lives. And what message do you want to say, Father?
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't have to be a Jesuit or even thinking about becoming a Jesuit to take advantage of the exercises. And in fact, you don't even have to be Catholic. There are many Christians and even non-Christians that will do the exercises or a modified version of the exercises. I would say fundamentally, it's about drawing yourself closer to God and recognizing how God has been active in your own life and in your own personal history. And so the exercises can kind of reaffirm that and bring you, closer to God.
So this is it, Father. Thank you very much. So today, me and Father John, we talk about the spiritual exercises. Since he just finishes his 30-day retreat for second time. So in the Jesuit life, so in the novitiate, we do once 30-day retreat, and then if you are accepted into the Society of Jesus, but you are not fully integrated to the Society of Jesus, and when you ordain, but you are still a scholastic priest. Once you finish your 30 days retreat in the tertianship program, so you are kind of in preparation to
Like
the
final
fully final
vows,
vows
yeah.
and fully integrate
Hmm.
the Jesuit. So this is his experience about his 30 retreats. And thank you very much, Father, for your insights, wisdoms, and knowledge, especially your experience about God, how God works in your life, live or in your life through your 30 retreat, but more especially your whole life for 20 years
Mm,
as a Jesuit and how you see God works. So as you mentioned in your final message that now I fully integrated my life to Jesus' missions and He's the center of my life. So once again, Father, thank you very much for
yeah,
this time
thank you for
opportunity.
having me. Yeah,
So God bless and
bless you as well.
continue
Thank
our
you.
formations well. Thank you very
Excellent.
much, Father.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.